17 minutes. That's how many minutes you were from lifting the NRL trophy last year, Broncos fans. 17 agonizing minutes. There really isn't much solace I can give you, but I can assure you we've all witnessed our sports teams absolutely throw it away at some point. Barcelona have that night at Anfield, the Falcons have the 2017 Super Bowl, and England have every penalty shootout in international tournament history. When Ezra Mann went in for a third try, it looked like the Broncos had ripped the trophy right out of Penrith's hands. A three-peat was starting to become wishful thinking for Penrith fans. Not for Nathan Cleary, however, as he went into full Terminator mode, turning the game around and pretty much winning it on his own. As a neutral fan, you didn't know whether to cheer or cry. On one hand, you don't want to see Penrith win another one, let's be honest. But at the same time, I don't know any reasonable neutral who would support the Broncos. But I think these fan emotions paled in comparison to how the 13 Broncos players on the pitch felt after the full-time siren. What started with a close, gritty win against the same opposition in round one ended in similar circumstances. However, this time, they were on the opposite end of it. And if that wasn't bad enough, memories of 2015 would also come back to haunt them, as they too lost that grand final in devastating fashion. Despite the tragedy, there was something to take away from this. The squad still had a plethora of young, talented players who not only gain experience from this loss, but it will build some character they can take into 2024. Here's how things have gone so far. Spoiler alert, not very fucking well. Round 1, Las Vegas. Rugby League can finally say they've come all the way from Haberfield to Sin City. The Broncos ran into round 1 heavy favourites against a Roosters side that had generally underperformed in 2023. The Broncos pretty much lined up the exact same team as they started in the grand final, with the omission of departed players Herbie Farnworth and Thomas Flegler, who had both moved to the Dolphins. But they had some new players as well. Dean Mariner was a bright and up-and-coming winger, brimming with speed and technical skill. His place in the starting side was completely justified, as he had shown such promise in the limited games he played in 2023. The forwards were also bolstered by new signing Fletcher Baker, who had transferred from the Roosters in the off-season. The Broncos strode out onto Allegiant Stadium to the thunderous applause from the crowd. 4 minutes in, they would throw an intercept, which was taken by Joseph Manu. It wasn't a great start, but this was a team that had generated such attention the year prior for being able to soak up pressure and dish out dominance in just a matter of a few sets. Reece Walsh then played a crucial role in the Broncos' first try, putting in a beautiful kick for his winger Mariner, which was grounded superbly. A great hit back. The conversion was subsequently missed, and the Broncos went into halftime 8-4 down. In the second half, sloppiness from the Broncos cost them, as Tedesco called the defense lacking, and after some Harlem Globetrotter stuff, the Roosters went further ahead courtesy of Vetalagia Pauga. I'll never fucking say that name right. I will never say that name right.
Marlena Zubath Camp.
Reece Walsh once again parried back with a great set play down the Roosters' right edge, splitting them open with his blistering pace. Now in 2023, the Broncos were statistically the strongest team going into the last 20 minutes of games. However, this was a new season, and flimsy defence from Brisbane allowed Tedesco to sneak through a gap and pass to an unmarked Victor Radley, who looked to seal the win for the Roosters. A big shock for the previous year's grand finalists, as they had their fair share of chances to capitalise on basic errors from their opposition, but they just couldn't finish them. Normal service was resumed in round 2, as they tore apart a struggling South Sydney side 28-18, courtesy of some more Reece Walsh magic. Look, honestly, if he stays fit and plays with the confidence we saw in that game, he's in for a big year.
Oh, this looks like he's been opened up badly.
And if that wasn't bad enough, Brisbane would go on to get thumped by the champions at Bluebet, a severe contrast to their round 1 achievement from the year prior. Sitting at 1 win and 2 losses, a big performance was needed against top-of-the-table North Queensland. Brisbane raced out to a 20-12 lead at half-time, and that was pretty much all she wrote. Yeah, I think Scott Drinkwater will probably want to forget this one. Brisbane's next game was arguably the most important game of the season, an away trip down south against an informed Melbourne. If there was any statement to make, it was to come out strong against the most dangerous team in the competition. Dean Mariner got them off to a great start, scoring a try 15 minutes in, but Eliesa Katoa hit back with a try of his own. 5 minutes later, Coates did what he does best after leaping into the stratosphere to put Melbourne in front. Brisbane then struck back with 2 tries in quick succession. First a beauty from Ezra Mann, and then Arthurs followed quickly after some brilliant razzle-dazzle footy. Unfortunately, complacency from the defence allowed Katoa to cross over untouched for his double. Things would start to turn horribly for Brisbane, as Reynolds suffered a hamstring injury just moments from half-time. After half-time, the extraordinary tries continued, with Ezra Mam scoring after Melbourne players watched the ball bounce in vacant space. This tit-for-tat dynamic that was shaping this match once again continued as Will Warbrick put Melbourne back in the game. Then Brisbane decided to do their best Parramatta impression by butchering 2 tries in quick succession. Tyron Wishart and Jerome Hughes inevitably put the game to bed with 2 late tries. A Ben Tekora 4-pointer with a couple minutes left just wasn't enough, as Brisbane ran out of time and fell short by 2 points. You know, for one of the best defensive teams in the comps, leaking 32 points doesn't really look convincing. Nevertheless, it wasn't time to panic yet. Reynolds had only suffered a minor hamstring strain, and the next fixture was a relatively simple one for the Bronx, taking on the Dolphins at Suncorp. Brisbane bounced back in style, beating the Finns 28-14, despite a pretty shaky first half. Despite the win, statistically Brisbane were behind the 8 ball, losing out in terms of possession and completion rate, most of this being present in the first half. But a win is a win, and Brisbane pushed forward, sticking to the system that had worked so well for them in 2023. With Reece Walsh back from injury, the attacking backline had a mountain of pressure taken off them, as he was back to his best with 2 tries, 3 line breaks, and 200 total running meters against a blitzed Raiders side. Reynolds' return in round 8 against the Tigers was a swift welcome back, as he tormented the struggling Spooners, putting on a kicking masterclass and showing the Broncos faithful how dedicated he is to this cause. 5th place by round 9, and despite a round 9 thumping at the hands of the Roosters, they hit back with 2 wins against Parramatta at CommBank and Manly in Magic Round. But I missed out a pretty important piece of information. Adam Reynolds suffered a devastating bicep injury in the Broncos' heavy loss against the Roosters, his 2nd injury in the space of a month. You know, I'm starting to think maybe getting rid of Dearden wasn't the best idea. He was set to miss almost 3 full months of footy, and coincidentally, this is where it all goes wrong. Origin periods. They're the make or break a team throughout the middle portion of the season. The Broncos suffered some pretty substantial losses throughout the representative window. Payne Haas, Reece Walsh, Pat Carrigan, and Selwyn Cobbo were all selected to play for their dedicated state, while Ezra Mam and Brendan Piakura were selected in the extended squads, but were allowed to return to club duties before the actual match. Without Reynolds, Walsh and Carrigan around him to dictate play, Mam was given more of an individual responsibility. Leading from the front and replicating the magic we saw last year was what he was tasked with. Brisbane survived a late scare against Manly to take advantage of the lack in squad depth, but the same couldn't be said next week as they conceded 36 points against the Titans in a thriller. Surely this won't happen.
Begin by oops.
Here's where the abysmal run of form starts. Round 14. They lost 22-12 against an inconsistent Shark side. Round 15. They faced South Sydney at Accor Stadium. Okay, well this looks like a really good game to hit back. I mean, after all, South Sydney have leaked an average 40 points a game, and Latrell Mitchell, their best player, was incredibly out of form. They have to win this one. Right? They were 18-0 down after 20 minutes. And okay, yes, Reece Walsh was still comatose from last week, but this performance simply does not reflect how dominant Brisbane have been over the last 12 months. Uncharacteristic errors from big players, a misguided halves pairing, and sloppy defensive reads summed up a miserable night for the Broncos as they eventually lost 22-12. 3 losses in a row. The bye seriously couldn't come quickly enough for the Broncos as they desperately needed some time to reset and figure out the issues that have been holding their explosive potential back. To me, there was a pretty glaring issue, and it presented itself in the form of pure Adam Reynolds dependency. Without Reynolds, the halves looked inexperienced and lacked any creative depth with the ball at their hands, kicking to opposition players on the full and trying way too hard to come up with the game-changing play. Ezra Mam had such a remarkable 2023, playing alongside his trusty halves partner, but this was showing very quickly how reliant he is on Reynolds. I mean, they still had a half a season to prove themselves, and up next was a trip away to New Zealand to take on the Warriors only a few days after the second Origin match. A brutal turnaround, but you know the losing Queenslanders in the side had something to prove after a poor showing in Melbourne. But much like how the Souths game started, Brisbane allowed a wave of Warriors possession to dismantle them early, once again conceding 3 straight tries. Tristan Saylor being a huge culprit in the turnover of possession. I have no fucking idea why Walters doesn't just shift Cobber to fullback. You know, he may not be as agile and quick, but he's got to be more reliable than Captain fucking Super League over there. Things would get worse for Brisbane in the second half, as they would be undone by some RTS and DWZ magic, culminating in a 4th straight loss. The first time since 2022 they would lose 4 games in a row. It would get much more daunting for Brisbane, as they would face last year's premiers and sleep paralysis demons Penrith at Suncorp Stadium. A valiant effort from an out-of-form Brisbane, as they could have closed the game up at certain points, but were undone by some sloppy defense at key moments, ending in a 14-6 defeat. The Broncos then set their sights on St George, a team who have struggled to beat Brisbane at the Cauldron in recent years. Origin-affected sides are in full swing, as both teams looked hell-bent on getting their season on the right track. Surely the Dragons can't win with Marsh-geared halfback.
Wrong!
It was 22-6 at half-time. I don't know what the Broncos' right-edge defense is made of, but I'm telling you, Helen Keller would have walked right through it and scored a try herself. 6 losses in a row. By now, you could really see how these losses were affecting Big Kev. I mean, that man has seen some stuff. It seemed like everything was just going wrong at this point. Queensland would go on to lose the State of Origin series at Suncorp, and morale was at an all-time low. Despite all the doom and gloom, they still had a mathematical chance of making finals, although the chances were relatively slim. In round 20, they would avoid a 7th consecutive defeat, something they hadn't done since the 2020 season. Probably best not to bring that up now. Ezra Mam redeemed himself with an outstanding performance, playing a crucial role in the club's 30-14 win over Newcastle. The Broncos' spine was also boosted with the important return of Adam Reynolds. Yeah, feels like he's been out for years. Bang! There we go. That's the Broncos we know and love. Bulldogs, you better be watching this. You're in for a real shock next week.
In turns, Sexton's kick. This is too good. Canterbury, stop back. Carras with a one-handed catch. Tracy doesn't pass the kick out. Now he does. Filiami goes over the wide. Passes to Tracy. Mam, I think, clipped off the heels of the referee. Way, Preston through. Marty on the inside. He bends the ears back for the corner. Back to Tracy. Bulldogs again. Whoever let the dogs out, they ain't coming back in.
I think after that performance, Suncorp will officially be named New Belmore. They couldn't even walk away from that game with just a shred of dignity. This was truly the end of the season. What started with such potential and optimism had spiraled down so quickly, I don't think the players could fathom the outcome. When Jarrell Skelton is making you his bitch, then I think it's time to pack up shop. And it gets worse. You think they would have learned something from that game? But no. They really didn't. I've never seen a team so hapless in defense. Like Reece Walsh! What are you doing, man? A 46-18 loss against the bottom 4-bound Titans side. And if everything wasn't catastrophic enough, Payne Haas and Ezra Mam finished the game with season-ending injuries. But things weren't completely over just yet. If they managed to win their final 4 games, and results from other games went their way, they could potentially still make the finals. The small glimmer of hope started in round 23, when they upset a heavily favoured Cowboys side in an intense Queensland derby. But this victory came at a cost, with Reece Walsh fracturing his wrist, meaning he'd be out for the remainder of the season. They then turned aside the Eels the following week in a fuck-ugly game. If errors won you premierships, these guys would have been immortalised after this game. 2 games remaining. The Broncos knew they had to win them both. And what a better way to stamp your authority on the competition than getting one over Wayne Bennett and his Dolphins side. No more excuses, no more errors, and no more ifs, buts, or maybes. Kevin Walters was adamant the Broncos would be playing in the final series in the post-game presser against Parramatta. But now was the time to let their football do the talking.
O'Sullivan, gets it on. Beautiful from the Dolphins. He won't be caught. Good night. Sullivan, whoever realised. Subtle, Farnworth, powerful. Yes. Tabuai Fina ducked under the high tackle and scored. And so Tabuai Fina was in again. Now it's O'Sullivan. Beautiful hands. Farnworth again. It's Herbie's night, and it just gets better and better.
But their football doing the talking meant being completely mute, then they did a really good job. Probably their worst performance of the season, saved up for the very end. A fitting loss for Kevy and his Broncos, who limped out of the finals race with their heads collectively between their legs. Now, you may be thinking, was it arrogance, overconfidence, laziness that led to the downfall of the Broncos this year? And yes, those suggestions are all completely valid. But I feel like the system set in place by Kevy had just become too predictable. The creativity in their football hasn't really evolved this year to a point where they can consistently win matches. On top of the fact they also lost their chief playmaker for half the season. All in all, what we saw was a catastrophic chain of reactions that culminated in a drastic drop-off of confidence and an inability to step up when things mattered. Do we see Walters get the boot? I don't think so, just yet. He started the initial rebuild, and he will be hell-bent on starting another one next season. But enjoy Bali while you guys still can. Thanks for listening today, everyone. I know the video consistency has kind of dropped off a little bit, but I will have a couple more videos on the way in the next couple weeks. Also, some good news about the channel. I'll be broadening the content out over the new year to include multiple sports in the off season and launching a video podcast with a couple mates. You can check us out over on Instagram. I'll link it in the description as well. That is the Australian Sporting Cartel. In the meantime, you know the drill. Stay frosty, stay golden, stay good.